Hello Pauper players, and perhaps persons peeking into the Pauper playroom. My name is Newt. Welcome to my channel, and today we're getting down and dirty in the mud, y'all. That's right, Pauper Mud, a colorless Tron deck focused on using a variety of utility lands and artifact synergies. So excited to show that one of my favorite decks in any format is viable in Pauper. Real quick, if you want to see me jam this jank myself, there is a link in the description. But for now, come with me, and I'm going to show you how to crank that jank. Well, first things first, you might be asking yourself, Mud, what kind of name is that for a Magic deck? Well, since our deck is completely colorless, that is sometimes referred to in the community as mono brown, but Mud is a fitting name mechanically as well, because we are trying to slow our opponents down as if they are trudging through mud, stabilize in the late game, and then take over with big, juicy, colorless spells. Being a colorless deck, we can play a bunch of lands whose design is that they come with added utility, with the downside of only tapping for colorless. Of course, this downside is completely irrelevant to us. So first, we have a full playset of Desert, which we can tap to deal 1 damage to target attacking creature. We can play this ability only during the end of combat. So while we still had to take damage from the creature, having repeatable removal on one of our lands is incredibly powerful. Next up, we have 3 copies of Cradle of the Accursed, which we can pay 3 to tap and sack to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Then we have a full playset of Haunted Fengraf, which we can pay 3, tap and sack to return a creature card at random from our graveyard to our hand. Then we have a single copy of Radiant Fountain just to gain a little bit of life. Lastly, for our lands, we are playing the Tron lands. That means we have 4 copies each of Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, and Urza's Power Plant to tap for 1 colorless mana, but if we control one of each, then they either tap for 2 or 3 colorless mana respectively. If you haven't heard of Tron, it is a ton of fun, and if you're sick of seeing Tron, maybe you'll appreciate that this is a unique spin on the archetype. Now we have a full playset of the recently unbanned Expedition map. This is a 1 mana artifact that we can pay 2 to tap and sack and search our library for land, put in our hand and shuffle. So this lets us consistently assemble our Tron pieces, as well as fetching any utility lands for whichever situation we find ourselves in. Now, moving on to our creatures, we have a full playset of Foundering Spectre. This is a 3/2 for 3 mana that makes our artifact spells cost 1 colorless less to cast. This gets out of control as we start to cast an obscene amount of spells per turn, and adding to this game plan is Sky Scanner, which is a 1/1 for 3 mana with flying. When it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Do not underestimate Sky Scanner, it is so good. Helps us get the Monarch, saves us from Delver Beats, drawing us plenty of cards along the way. Moving up the curve, we got 4 copies of Rusted Relic, a 4 mana artifact with Metalcraft, which means it's a 5/5 golem as long as we control 3 or more artifacts, which is not going to be difficult to do whatsoever. Then we have 3 copies of Staunch Throne Guard, a 2/5 for 5 mana with Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, we become the Monarch. If you are new to Pauper, it is crucial to understand the Monarch and its significance on the meta. Once introduced, it will take over a game. Simply put, controlling the Monarch for several turns in a row near guarantees victory. The card advantage is redonkulous. And then we have new from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Thundersteel Colossus, a 7 mana 7/7 vehicle with trample, haste, and crew 2, meaning we have to tap 1 or more creatures with power 2 or more to crew it and make it a creature until end of turn. I've been playing Mud in Pauper for a while actually, and Thundersteel Colossus is the exact win condition this deck needed. Being that it is our main win condition, it's important that it synergizes with a lot of our deck, including the last of our creatures, which is Maelstrom Colossus, a 7/7 for 8 mana that has Cascade, which basically means when we cast it, we get to cast the next spell in our deck. So if we tap out to cast Maelstrom Colossus, yes, it has Summoning Sickness, but if we cascade into Thundersteel, we can use Maelstrom to crew Thundersteel and start swinging right away. Thundersteel Colossus and Rusted Relic are also similar in the fact that they both don't count as creatures in the graveyard. So they work really well with Haunted Fengraf. Since they don't count as creatures, we don't have to worry about hitting them with the randomness of Haunted Fengraf. Instead, we can zero in creatures like Sky Scanner if we need to chump block and draw cards, or even Maelstrom Colossus to just keep repeatedly getting that 2-for-1 value. Now, with all of this in mind, Cradle of the Accursed becomes much better. We now have a fetchable, uncounterable creature that we can get in a pinch to crew our Thundersteel. It makes Thundersteel Colossus that much more of a consistent win condition. Moving on to our non-creature spells, pretty simple stuff here. 4 copies of Mind Stone for ramp. We can sack it in the late game when we need to draw, and 4 copies of Spare Supplies, just straight up gas. And then we have a couple copies of Alchemist Vial for maintaining the Monarch. Again, the Monarch is very good. You want to keep it as much as you can. Don't let the Monarch slip through your buttery fingers. Now, lastly, for our sideboard, we have 1 copy of Quicksand as well as 2 copies of Radiant Fountain. I really like that we can play different sorts of utility lands in the sideboard and switch them out for the lands we don't need, because this means we don't have to sacrifice any of our main pieces or slow down our game plan at all while adjusting to the matchup. Then we have a full playset of Gutshot. I will stop talking about it when it stops being so good. Instant speed, free removal for Delver, Well-Wisher, Glistener Elf, Scourge Prospector, whatever you need to snipe at the very beginning of the game, Gutshot has your back. Then we have a single copy of Ninja's Kunai, basically a colorless overcasted lightning bolt. 3 copies of Relic of Progenitus for Grave Hate. Relic also works very well with that tap ability to better control our graveyard and zero in on creatures with Haunted Fengraf, which, if you remember, is the land that lets us return a creature card at random to our hand. And then we have 2 copies of Filigree Familiar, just overall value here, good against aggro, burn, and Chaiden's Edict. And lastly, for our sideboard, we have 2 copies of Introduction to Annihilation for some catch-all removal. And there you have it. That is Pauper Mud, one of my favorite decks of all time. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, as it really helps me out a lot. If you want to hang out with me and the rest of the Jank gang and watch me play decks like this in real time, you can do that at twitch.tv/NewtGrundy. Hope you all have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.